Briefcase Crimes contains graphic descriptions of violent events, loud dog noises, and very bad jokes, and is not suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome, listeners, to Briefcase Crimes.
I'm Hannah, and I'm full of terrifying facts about horrific events.
I'm Liz, and I'm full of morbid curiosity. And today... Why are you looking at me?
Because this is your episode.
I feel a lot of pressure right now.
And today you have guests.
I'm sorry, I just blanked. I got stage fright.
You're supposed to go, Hannah.
Hannah.
Elizabeth.
I almost said my own name.
It's Elizabeth. Hannah.
Brittany.
It's because you're literally set up right now like you're doing a presentation.
I am.
We're like, tell us more.
Today we're going to talk about ghost ships.
So, if you've been with us since almost the beginning, you will be familiar with Miss Brittany and Miss Susan, and they have joined us again today. So, Brittany, what curiosity or knowledge do you have?
Well, I have been recovering from surgery and got lost on a whirlpool of true crime lately.
That's lost in a whirlpool of true crime.
Yes, a whirlpool.
Suze, what do you know?
Absolutely nothing, but I really like ghosts and ships and true crime sometimes.
Sometimes.
You like a mystery.
I do like a mystery. I grew up on Scooby-Doo.
Scooby-Doo.
We are just like the modern day real life. I almost said Monsters, Inc. Mystery. Is it Mystery, Inc.?
Mystery Inc., yeah.
Except I think we're... No. Yes.
Let's split up.
No.
We
Oh.
have 4 humans.
They have 4 humans and a dog.
We
And
have
there's
cat.
4 of us.
The cat's the
So who would be who in Mystery Inc.?
Well, Brittany's Daphne. There's
I'm
no
Velma.
argument.
You're Freddie.
You are obviously for.
But
You
he's
are
the
obviously-
leader.
Okay.
Is
Why
he,
am I
though?
obviously Freddie?
Because you're more likely to wear an ascot.
Okay.
I wear bell bottoms more often. I literally have red bell bottom pants upstairs.
I feel like, honestly, Susan and I are Shaggy and Scooby more than anyone is Fred.
Well, then you're Scooby.
That's... I'm the lovable one.
Okay.
I'm the one the show would be named after. Okay, Elizabeth, tell us about Yoast chips.
All right, so today is a monthly mystery. This mystery has mostly been solved, but as I always say, we'll get to it.
Okay.
So, today we are talking about ghost ships. And if we go to our next or first slide, I should say, we have some of the many ghost ships that have been found. So, starting in, I believe in about 2011, these ships started washing up on the shores of Japan. And they sometimes were empty. They had fishing equipment on them. Sometimes they had bodies on them. Sometimes the bodies had been on the ships for so long that by the time they washed up, they were partially skeletal. So, like I said, this started, let me see, the earliest date I have, is 2011. But it really didn't gain major international traction until 2015, when 12 boats were found within 5 days of each other.
Dang.
Yeah.
Also, if they're out to sea and floating around,
Mhm.
it's not surprising that they're partially skeletized
Right.
by the time they get there because like you've got the wind and you've got the sun and you've got the salt and you've got the water.
Plus,
Yep.
if they
So-
ever come close enough to land, but not actually within distance to be brought in, you have birds and stuff that can pick it up.
Oh
too.
yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So some of them like actually washed up, like hit land, but some of them were like just found drifting and like they brought them in. Basically, most of the ships were wooden fishing boats. They sometimes had survivors though. They sometimes had live fishermen on them. Some of these ships had engines and propellers, but nothing like even near strong enough to like really be able to like travel the seas, because the area that these were washing up on is known as the East Sea, which is the sea between Japan, China, Russia, Korea. So it's this like circular area of sea. So go ahead, you have a question, I can tell.
Well, just wouldn't survivors negate any sort of mystery because they could be like, "This is what happened. I was there."
It's very complicated.
Okay, that's why we're having an episode.
Yeah. So many of the boats also had writing on the side, and the writing was North Korean. Yes.
I figured it out.
How do you wait a minute? Okay,
Oh,
go ahead.
okay, go
Brittany.
ahead, Detective Brittany.
North Korean pirates.
No.
Here's my question, and Brittany and Susan might be good ones to bring in for this. How do you know it's North Korean? Is there a difference
Yes.
in the
Yes.
writing?
There's a big difference.
What?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know, like, all of the history behind it, so guarantee I'm getting something wrong. But, like, obviously after the split, after the divorce.
Oh my god.
Number one, that's just going to happen naturally as, like, language develops over time, because once
Yeah.
you're two separate countries, then obviously, like, slang and just organically how language develops will be completely different without that interaction with each other. But also there's a difference in how each region developed, considering that like Korea itself, even as a whole, had been kind of ruled and dominated by other Asian countries throughout its history.
Yeah.
So, like, depending on what parts of language they were covered, like, on each side of the border, after that is how the language developed separately. So first you have, like, the natural organic progression of language on its own developing separately, like how our slang is very different from, like, British slang.
Yeah, but
And then you also have the, like, when I could be getting some of this wrong, but, like, while they were ruled by China, at some point it was like, you're not allowed to use Korean anymore, you have to use Chinese characters. So North Korea or South Korea, one of the two, could have been like, well, we have more Chinese characters in what we use day to day now, and the other could have been like, well, we recovered more like original Korean characters, and that's what we use primarily in writing and things like that.
okay, because that was my thing. Was like, it's written on the side of a boat. It's not like spoken language.
Yeah.
Right.
At some point, the country as a whole was ruled by another Asian country that tried to wipe out their alphabet. So then, separately, one country recovered from that very differently than the other one.
I don't know if that's true. Because I don't know if it started out with
I
they
don't-
had the Chinese alphabet and then moved to Korean, or if they had the Korean alphabet then moved to
I
Chinese.
think it was Korean, then Chinese, then Korean again, and there was just a lot of back and forth there and mixing
I
in
have
with
to edit
other.
this a lot. I'm
That's
sorry.
Why are you apologizing to her?
And that's why we're clarifying that, like, we don't know the whole thing, obviously. We're not historians in that regard.
Let's just
Yeah.
say
We just know that at some point there was some language mixing in that wasn't strictly Korean, and the countries, once separated, developed past that very differently from one another.
they have two different like styles of.
Writing.
It's
Of
like
writing.
dialects for written.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
that would be the difference between like we would spell like how we spell color, and how like the UK, Australia, Canada
The
spelled color.
OUR.
Yeah, we don't do
Yeah.
the OU thing.
Yeah.
It's just
Or like
nuances.
draft, like
Mhm.
those kinds of things. Like I don't know if it would be like that times 10, I guess. If you're a listener from Korea or a Korean American or anyone familiar with this, let us know what the differences are. I'm curious now.
Mhm.
Because like a lot of what we have learned about it also is just like hearsay or what we learned on the internet through just random posts about weird facts about history and things like that. So we're obviously not getting all the information, and we appreciate any like clarity on the subject.
Yeah.
So
What was written there? What did it say?
it was just like identifying information. So we'll get into a little bit more like there's a system,
Yeah.
and we'll talk about that like a little bit later, but I don't want to get into it now.
The implication being though that these vessels are North Korean in
Yes.
origin.
Yes.
Okay.
But the
I
question
thought-
is, why are they washing up in Japan?
I thought you meant like these were Japanese vessels that had been like vandalized
No.
in North Korea.
No. They are North Korean boats.
Okay.
So if you go to the next page, this map has the dates and locations that all of the ships showed up within that like 5-day span. So you can see across Japan like how wide they're scattered on that western coast.
Don't tell me these were refugee ships that washed up.
Not really. There's very little to actually back up that they were refugees, and
Okay.
there's a lot of reasons, and we're going to talk about the reason for that as well.
Okay.
So then, if you go to the next slide, I have another map. This just gives you like a wider perspective of the East Sea, and you can see like there's some other locations. We're going to talk a little bit about this map as we go. So we'll come back to it and I'll explain some more about it.
Okay.
So, like I said, they started washing up in 2011. Since 2013, though, like so from about, I think because of COVID, like a lot of the reporting on this issue has really, really slowed down. I had a really hard time finding anything more recent than 2019. I did find a few things from like the summer of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to say from like 2013 to 2019, over 100 fishermen were rescued alive in Japan. But it's a vast minority. It's really hard to count how many victims there were just because they're spread out so far and it's not always recorded as to like how many bodies are there. And also because they're decomposed, it's really hard to identify them based on like the forensics they are able to do. Most of them, they speculate, died either from dehydration, starvation, or even hypothermia. So, basically, this whole situation is like a strain on Japan, right? Because you've got these shipwrecks coming up. Now, they're not like huge ships, because they're just fishing boats. Like, they're like ship is really an overstatement. I think the biggest one that I found like a measurement for was only 50 meters long.
What is that in freedom units?
Like,
how many bald eagles wingtip
No.
to wingtip?
You can do the conversion. I don't know. I'm not going to look it up.
A meter is like
It's
3
roughly
feet.
a yard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not necessarily big enough to be a commercial fishing vessel.
No.
Like half a football field.
Yeah. And these are like primitive boats. They are all wooden. They are fishing vessels, but even so, like they are not outfitted with like a lot of like modern fishing luxury equipment, you know.
So it's like more like what your dad would take you out on fishing if you're camping with him, stuff like that.
Yeah,
like...
but you can tell that it's meant to be commercial.
Okay.
So
more like small merchant fishermen than like
Yeah.
people fishing for like
A
I don't
company
know,
or something.
Gordon's or whatever.
right.
The only fish brand I could think of.
Right. So this ends up costing Japan like millions.
How?
because they have to have the police come in to investigate every
I didn't even
body.
think about that.
They have to have people clean up the wreckage. They have to deal with the bodies. They have to repatriate those who survive, because Japan does not deport North Koreans. So,
Good.
yeah, that is a good thing. But many of them want to go back anyway, and we'll talk about that.
It doesn't seem like they're refugees, like they're trying to leave North
Yeah.
Korea.
Yeah,
They're
and
just fishing.
and because Japan doesn't have a diplomatic relationship with North Korea, disposing of the remains is like, they don't really have any straightforward like guidance on that. So there's one particular town, not yet. No, I'll tell you when. So there's one town in Sakata, Japan, and they're one of the, like, I watched a whole bunch of like videos and like little documentaries and stuff about this. There's a squid fisherman named Ken Honma, and he fishes in the Yamato Bank in the middle of the East Sea. So if you look on the top map, you'll see kind of like the weird geometric shape. This is basically an area like right in the middle, and it's kind of, it's not like a free for all, but it is kind of like a neutral fishing zone. So it's also a spot where it's meant to be for the Japanese to fish there and like South Korea to fish there. But this fisherman reported that in 2014, all of a sudden, North Korean fishermen started showing up here. So they would show up in huge groups of like 1,800 ships sometimes.
Wow.
And by ships, again, I mean these little boats. Sometimes they would have a larger ship like tow the smaller boats in. So the smaller boats would do the fishing. And because obviously their engines and stuff didn't have that much capacity, you know, that way it would reserve fuel and stuff. But they started showing up in 2014 and fishing in this area illegally. Like, they're not supposed to be there. They're not supposed to be fishing in this area. So they're stealing from Japanese waters, which is a problem, clearly.
Yeah, it's like poaching.
It is. It is exactly poaching. So this fisherman said that they're also overfishing. So they're destroying the ecosystem, essentially. In 2018, he reported that they caught 3 million. I'm assuming, I think it was translated into dollars, like American dollars, like $3 million worth of squid. But the next year, they only caught 2 million worth, and they were lucky to have caught that much. Many of the other fishermen didn't even get half as much as they had the prior year.
Because the squid aren't able to recuperate what they lost last season.
And they not only are poaching where they shouldn't be, but they are also getting adolescent squid that are not mature enough to reproduce yet. So they're cutting off, you know, the chance of reproduction.
Yeah, like the next generation that would be replenishing the...
Exactly. So they're breaking lots of ethical rules
and
here.
Legal laws. There's always laws when it comes to that kind of stuff about how much you... I don't imagine it's any different in Japan and Korea, but there's always laws about how much you can harvest of an animal and how much, what kind of animal and all of that.
Yes. So one more thing that he had said that I kind of thought was of note was that the Japanese fishermen were told to just stay away from the North Koreans because they, quote, might do something bad to them. I didn't find any reports of anything like that happening, but obviously North Korea and Japan have had kind of a tumultuous relationship, so it makes sense that they're just told to like just keep away from it as well as they can. So, why did they suddenly show up in Japan's waters? So, North Korea is, what would you even call it? Like the state of North Korea?
A democratic republic. That's what
no.
it calls itself.
No.
A country.
It doesn't.
A country.
It does not operate as a democratic republic.
Should.
What
are you looking for? A system of government or
Communism.
It's a communism. So here's the thing.
Dictatorship.
Here's the thing. So North Koreans like fish economy. I'm not using the right word, but I can't think of the word that I want. Yeah, their fish market was state run for a long time, like decades.
Okay. Like lots of things in North Korea.
Right. So by that I mean that it was federally funded. The fishermen were federally employed. The government provided the vessels, the tools, all of that. Not anymore. Basically, let me see if I can find the year here. I think it started, I didn't write the year here. It's probably down further. I think around the late 90s, they decided, these ships that we have to, maintain are big and costly, and they eat a ton of fuel, and it's too expensive, and we don't want to do it anymore. So what they did was they, quote, shut down the state system, and instead they started selling fishing licenses so that locals who had become unemployed and are struggling still, could feel like a business owner. It's basically a government MLM. I'm not going to lie. Like, the way that this all works out, it's like a crappy MLM.
Is it like you can keep your boat, but you have to get 6 friends to get their own boat as well?
Kind of. Here's the thing. So they're not federally employed. They're essentially contractors. They have to pay for their fishing license every year. They have a boat that is theirs, but in North Korea, you're not permitted to own property. So it's still not their boat.
So at all, they're not allowed to own
No.
anything?
It's still the government's boat, but not on the government's budget.
Right.
You sound like a complete, like, Babe in the Woods kind of, like, what? But, like, I don't know that much about North Korean, like, daily life. The fact that you're not allowed to own property.
No, you can't. You can't, like, own anything hardly. Like, I mean, you can own things, but I mean, the people of North Korea are literally starving to death. Like, they're a struggling population of people. So now that they're no longer technically run by the state, all these fishermen are in a really dangerous position, because not only are they contracted, but their contract includes quotas. And if you don't meet your quota, you lose your license. And if you lose your license, you can't feed your family.
Which you're probably struggling to do anyway.
Exactly. Even with the license, you're struggling. So it's like this rock and hard place situation. So basically, everything is just dangerous and complicated, and these fishermen are set up to fail, right? So North Korea has a border. It borders
South Korea.
Obviously, it borders South Korea.
Yeah, that's what you know.
But it also borders China and Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So there's a river that separates North Korea from China. And just upstream from this border, there is a North Korean village that is part of a fishing production unit. And if you know anything about Korea, you probably know that North Korea is very, like, military first always, right? So there's this production unit just, like, like 20 kilometers ish away from China. And they are a town, a village that has constant military supervision because they're so close to the border, even though China does have a diplomatic relationship with North Korea and will deport North Koreans back to North Korea.
That doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't mean anything. They
'Cause-
still have patrols there.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you cross the border from Mexico to the United States will deport you to Mexico.
Right.
That doesn't keep people from doing it.
Right. Exactly.
Like,
So in this village, there's all these fishermen. They fish. The fish give all of the fish that they catch to the production unit that's based in this village. The production unit gives the fish directly to the army, and the fishermen keep nothing. They don't get to keep any of their catch.
do they get paid?
I'm assuming that they get paid because
otherwise, why?
Well, hold on. I'm assuming that they get paid because the production unit is tracking their work. So I'm assuming they're tracking the quota and whether or not they deserve to get what they do get, which is a daily meal ration of 150 grams or 3/4 of a cup of rice.
I thought you were going to say 150 grains of rice, and I was going to be like, who's counting that? But no, grams is easier to digitize.
Yeah. So all their catch goes to the army, and they get less than a cup of rice.
They literally get paid in rice.
Literally.
That's
Well, yeah, because you don't
awful.
need money. It's a communism. The government's providing.
I mean, let's get this straight, though, because, North Korea is not just an example of communism. North Korea is a military dictatorship.
It's a military state, yeah.
So it's not to say that,
it's that they're doing it the wrong way.
every time that there is a communist venture, it is doomed to go this way, where
Right.
you're getting, schweened by the government.
Yeah.
But in this particular instance,
It has gone very awry.
yeah, it is
Very,
not. It
very,
is, It is a
very.
military dictatorship.
You could say it's not very rice.
Is that supposed to be
Brittany.
nice? Is that a play on nice?
Sure is. Sure is.
Such a
Small, medium, and large.
such a clear joke that I got it immediately. I didn't have to think about it or ask about it at all. Well thought out.
At least you laughed.
Yeah, I appreciated it.
Alrighty. So, obviously, in order to be a military state, you kind of need money, right?
I thought you were going to say you kind of need a military.
Well, yeah. They've got the people. What they don't have, or what they can't get on their own, is more money. Because they need to be bringing money in from outside of themselves in order to sustain this model that they have.
Yeah. And they don't have a lot of diplomatic relationships.
No, they don't have a lot of diplomatic relationships. They also don't have a lot of desirable resources. But one resource that they do have is seafood.
Gotta get them squids.
Yep. So this is one of the very few things that they're able to export.
Yeah.
So it's less expensive now for them to get the resource because they're not running the state operation anymore. They're running this MLM from hell.
Government run MLM.
Seriously.
Not
Should
even
be the title of
not even once.
And then they are selling that they're feeding their army first, and then they're selling a portion for profit to other countries, mainly China. Especially now, years ago, they were exporting to more countries, but there are rules that were set in place by the UN now that prohibit trade from North Korea to other countries. And most of the export that's going to China now is black market because it's not legal by the UN.
Okay.
So they are using these smaller boats. They're making more profit because their people are desperate and they'll do anything at this point to provide for their families as well as they can. And that means that they're just going to overfish, and the fishers are going to venture farther and farther away from North Korean waters because they're depleting their own supply. So they have to go elsewhere.
And deplete their supply.
Exactly. So one of the documentaries that I watched was done by Al Jazeera.
Oh, he can sit on the table and
he's
just chill
fine.
with us.
We have animal noises in the disclaimer. We're fine.
We have no dog this week because we're not recording out of my house.
Yes.
But we are graced with the presence of a very adorable cat.
A chunky boy. Anyways, so Al Jazeera said they interviewed a North Korean defector who was a fisherman there when he was in North Korea. And this North Korean defector reported that, and he was like anonymous and everything, like they distorted his face and his voice and all that. He reported that basically what North Korea has done is, and this is like just insane to me, not only are they issuing fishing licenses to the North Korean citizens, they decided that they were going to sell fishing licenses to Chinese fishermen to illegally fish in North Korean waters. So what's happening here is that the Chinese fishermen are fishing in the North Korean waters, and the North Korean fishermen are being told, you can't fish here because these Chinese guys are going to fish here, so you need to go elsewhere, but you better make your quota.
So Chinese pirates.
Pretty much. So they have to provide their own boats, but they have to employ North Korean fishers, which I assume is a combination of giving work to the citizens as well as, like, their lips will be sealed. Like, kind of keeping the witnesses to a minimum. That's just my assumption. But, trying to keep their cards close to their chest sort of thing.
So, like, the bottom line here is that everything that's being done is, like, highly illegal.
Super duper illegal. Like,
Very
mega.
sketch.
Yeah. It's, like, ridiculously illegal.
But how do they all get lost at sea?
That's a good question.
It's all
Well-
coming out on a big rig.
Oh, yeah.
Is
This is, like,
a big
something...
rig.
This is, like, oh, the boats are hitting. Oh, they're from North Korea. Oh, they came from North Korea because of this. But, oh, they were in that position because of that. Like,
Mhm.
it's, like...
It's turtles all the way down.
Absolutely. So, there's, like, the more I read, I was like, holy crap. Like, there are so many layers to this.
I thought maybe this would end up being, like, like the Bermuda Triangle.
Mhm.
It was like the East Sea Pentagon, I guess. It has 5 sides. The little polygon there.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty. So, basically what happens, like I said, these Chinese people are given a license, and they do enforce, like, the license that the Chinese fishers get are designated to a certain region, and North Korea does enforce that the Chinese stay to a certain region, but it's also really fishy, because sometimes those regions are still places that North Korea is not allowed to be.
Oh.
Yeah. And there's organizations that track, like, poaching and things like this. And the Chinese boats, because China's supplying the boats, right? They are equipped with more technology, like more radar, more nav systems, radios, and things like that. And they know that when they go into these areas, they shut down all their nav systems so that they don't show up to, like, the coast guards. But then, of course, these organizations that are tracking the poaching, they're using satellites. So, of course, they can see them in the water via these satellites. So, like I said before, the UN introduced a rule that would limit North Korea from selling their seafood to pretty much any other country. And that was introduced in August of 2017. The time of this rule it being put into place and when they started to actually enforce this rule coincides with the time in which the number of shipwrecks increased significantly, like huge. And I have numbers. I'm going to go over numbers with you in a second.
Okay.
You have receipts.
I do.
Is it like an embargo on the sale and trade of seafood only or all goods?
This in particular is seafood.
Okay.
Because they're starting to see like the havoc that's being
The
like
haddock that's being reached.
the haddock.
The haddock.
But yeah, they're starting to see like the ecological disaster that's happening, and they're like, no, this needs to stop. And the best way that they can think to do that is to be like, guess what? Your number one export can't do it anymore, is basically what the UN tried to do.
Yeah.
But they're just smuggling it now. So, but because it's being smuggled, that means that North Korea has to sell the product for less than they were charging before.
Yeah, you can't sell black market goods for full price.
Exactly. And that's putting even more strain on the fishermen because they have to catch and sell more in order to make the same amount of money. Right?
This is the least well thought out MLM I've ever heard of.
I know.
Have they tried LuLaRoe instead?
No.
Just a bunch of North Koreans in like, imagine the North Korean military just in like some really fancy patterned leggings.
Yeah.
And tunic tops.
Yeah.
That's what they do now.
It'll be great.
They sell patterned leggings and tunic tops.
Yeah.
I love it.
So then another defector who was a fisherman also came forward to, give his experience of what happened. Actually, one of them was anonymous and one of them wasn't. And I can't remember which was which. But either way, basically, he fished on the eastern coast of North Korea. And he said that the incidents at sea are not only being caused by rough weather, which the weather is rougher in the winter, which also explains why they had like so many ships coming up in the winter months, but also because the waves are just literally so high that the men can't, like the boats are just not big enough to handle seas that rough. And what basically is happening is that these fishermen are also dying because they're getting rattled around. They're getting concussions.
Oh.
They're having heart attacks from just the stress of it. And sometimes they just like can't handle it anymore and they just jump ship and they're just done. They decide that it's easier to just end it all than continue to do what they're doing. So he claimed that it was in 2012 that it actually started, that these North Korean boats started having to venture farther and farther out to fish. They were told at that point, just sail for 24 hours and then fish wherever you land after sailing for 24 hours straight. And their boats could carry 20 tons of squid. And they would just fill their tank up, tell them to go, pack enough food for 3 months at sea, and they're told, don't come back until you hit your quota. Just don't come back.
That's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Listen, they weren't clown fishing around.
Is this why we invited you to this episode, just for the puns?
I'm here for it.
I'm just watching her brain work as you talk, like, I'm ready for this.
So he told his interviewer that after you travel for 350 miles, so if you're hitting the coast, you're traveling east from the North Korean coast. After 350 miles, you're in Japanese waters. So it's really not far in the scheme of like that kind of travel.
Plus looking at maps, who knows what's what size. I recently was told that from the bottom, like the tip bottom of Brazil to the top of Brazil is more distance. It's farther than the top of Brazil to Canada.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that insane?
That is.
That is insane.
Yeah.
And it's because, like, most of our maps, the U.S. is, like,
In the center.
It is huge. And it's like, Brazil.
Yeah.
Why? What right do you have to be so large?
And it's like you take something round and lay it flat and it just has to get distorted.
Yeah, a mess. But anyway,
Yeah.
you can't look at the EC and be like, oh, I think I know how big that is, because
Yeah.
maps are they are untrustworthy. I'm calling out all cartographers today.
Yeah. So these guys, they sail for 24 hours, and if they go farther than that and end up in Japanese waters, and then their engine breaks or they run out of fuel, it's inevitable that the water pulls them into the Japanese coast. That's just what's going to happen.
And if they're being rattled around and they like bonk their heads and get a concussion or something, like, it's very likely that they might need to get a sturgeon.
Stop. Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Quit clown fishing around.
We already did that one.
Fine. All right. Real quick, and then we're going to take a break here in just a second. So, according to this defector, also, the North Korean government is well aware of the boats, but they claim that it's just a sacrifice that must be made in the name of profit.
Oh, okay.
They believe it can't be helped, and they consider it a pity that they're losing men who are otherwise well fit to work.
That's very capitalist for a communist government.
Right?
It is. It is very.
Yep. So, why don't we take a break there for an ad and for us to stretch our leggies and our backs?
Yes. And to pet the clown.
And
or the catfish.
The clown.
Pet the catfish.
And enjoy this ad.
And we're back.
So, I'm going to start us out talking about some numbers here.
Which numbers? What's your favorite number?
11.
That was my softball number. That was my softball number, and I loved it because if you looked at it, my jersey in a mirror, it was the same.
Mm-hmm.
So it was easy for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Simple.
Anyhow, so I have the numbers of how many boats were recorded as having either been washed up or found drifting on the shores of Japan from 2011 until 2019. Like I said, I had a really hard time finding things once COVID happened.
Yeah, because the press was like, oh, we've got bigger fish to fry than random boats.
Bigger
Fish to fry.
Oh, that was
Oh.
an unintended one.
So in 2011, they had 57. In 2012, 47.
Wow.
2013 went up to 80. 14 went down to 65. 15 down to 45. In 16, it went to 66. And then in 2017, and remember this is when that the UN started enforcing the rule about not exporting seafood from North Korea, the number went up to 104.
Wow.
They found, this year I do have recorded that they found at least 35 bodies and 42 survivors just in 2017 alone.
Wow.
2018, it went up to 225.
Oh my.
Yeah. And then 2019 was 158. So I'm not sure when, if that's accounting for the entire year of 2019 or if it like cut off somewhere. Like I said, more wash up in the winter. So they usually have like a like steady number and then they get like an influx at the end of the year.
That makes a lot more sense with the figure of how much it costs Japan to handle all of these. Because I was thinking like
a couple here and there.
No.
I was thinking that the 12 over the span of like 5 days or whatever was like, oh, 12 must have been like 12 in 3 days is a lot, to be fair.
In 5 days.
But that must be an anomaly.
I thought it was just like, oh, 12 is like a high number in general. And I'm like, how much could it cost to dispose of like 12 boats and all of that? But like
hundreds of them.
Yeah, hundreds every year.
And they're washing up all over the coast. So it's not like you can have a task force in one city who's eating my iPad cover. You know, like they're all different police forces. They have to have like they have to decide who's responsible for what bodies. Like usually what ended up happening was the local municipality of where the ship washed out was responsible for the bodies. Yeah.
Can you imagine being on like family vacation and being like, Dad, what's that? And you're like, oh my
Literally, that's what was happening. Like you would just be walking on the beach and boom, boat.
Boom boat.
Boom, boat.
Also, my thought.
Alternatively, boo boats instead of ghost ships.
Oh my God.
Ghost ships, or as we're calling them now,
Boo boats.
I had a thought and I completely lost it with boo boats. Oh, so yeah, and it's not like you can just not like investigate these.
Right.
Like it's not like you can just be like, oh, that's just one of them boo boats.
Right.
Like, because about the time you do that, somebody has like committed a murder and made it look like this.
Right, exactly.
Are you looking up fish puns,
No.
Brat?
I was just looking up fish.
I'll have you know, we play Animal Crossing. We have all the fish puns.
What kind of
Listen,
carp is this?
Don't get so crabby with me.
Oh. All I can think is, it's a dace. I hope I have some space.
Alrighty. So, we've talked about Japan. We've talked a little bit about China. Obviously, we've talked about North Korea. Interestingly enough, South Korea really doesn't have much of a role in this story.
They're just minding their own business, doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, exactly. But there's another player in the ring.
Oh?
Is it Hulu?
Is it Stone Cold Steve
I just hope you
Austin?
could hear his tongue.
Is it... Wait, Britt, it's not time.
It's not time. I will tell you.
She will always let you know when it's time for
I
another
have
slide.
it up, so I see it, and
Not
like I
just
know.
that, but our listeners can access the slides in the brief, so then they know when to go to the next
Mhm.
slide. It's like a ding, turn the page.
Yeah. All right. So our next player is Russia.
Oh, I was thinking it was going to be Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Nope. Mm-mm.
With the chair and the Stone Cold
Mm-mm.
Stunner.
So there are reports from lots of sources that North Koreans are fishing in Russian waters to the north. So in Russia, fishermen there.
In Russia, fish fishes you.
That was the perfect sound.
It was. So in Russia, fishermen and villagers and all kinds of people report that they see these North Korean ships, boats,
Boo
really.
boats.
And
Pre-boo boats.
the interesting thing, because nothing else has mentioned this up to this point, but when we talk about Russia, all of a sudden they start talking about how these North Korean fishers are coming in, they're fishing Russian waters, and they're using drift nets, which are prohibited for use, I believe, also by the UN, because they catch everything.
Yeah, there's no discrimination between what you're hauling in.
Crabs, fish, plants, everything.
That's how you ruin ecosystems and snag a lot of endangered
Yeah.
creatures.
These
Yep.
nets catch everything.
Birds, even.
Catch these nets.
So they're wrecking the environment with these stinking nets. They're dangerous to divers. You can catch divers up in these nets, or the divers can get tangled in them.
They could get barracuda. In
Oh my god! And not only are they using these nets, which are prohibited, but once they're done, they're just dumping them in the water.
Why?
And the nets can be a kilometer in length.
But that just seems so, like, wouldn't you want to use it again?
They're like made of a weird, like, it's almost as if it was like a woven net, like an Afghan of fishing line.
Are
So-
they one-time use?
Pretty much.
Then who's manufacturing them if they're not supposed to be using them?
They're being made in North Korea, I assume.
Some old woman in her house is just crocheting all of these drift
Yeah.
nets.
Oh my god.
Just churning them out.
She's doing it.
Yeah.
For the halibut.
Brittany!
It was very sort of. Cthulhu, you're the terror of the deep.
What do you know about drift nets?
What do you know about this?
Yeah, you could use a drift net. You could catch dolphins. You could catch crabs. You could catch birds. You could catch Cthulhu, the terror of the deep.
Yep.
Destroyer of worlds.
Yeah.
Ariel, the Little Mermaid. Russian and Japanese coast guards are trying.
Yeah.
They're trying to mitigate this. In 2019, the Japanese Coast Guard turned back over 1,500 manned North Korean fishing boats.
Good.
Yeah. Go ahead to your next slide.
Brittany
We're
has been
excited.
waiting.
And then Susan did it for her. All right. So again, we have a little image of just like the sea, the East Sea, and the little fishing region, the Yamato Pass or Yamato Bank. They call it different things.
I thought those boats were tampons.
Oh my god.
Where are you seeing tampons?
These satellite images.
Why would your brain go immediately to tampons?
Because the cat was mostly in my way viewing the slide, and all I saw was a little white tube shape.
Gross.
What's wrong with you?
So, tampons no more.
All these ghost tampons are washing up on
God.
shore.
So we have these groups who are tracking the poachers. They're using satellite. And beginning in 2013, by satellite and also by radar, they began detecting these massive groups of North Korean fishing boats in Russian waters as well. So if you look at the bottom left photo, it's like a sonar radar blip kind of thing. You see the huge cluster at the bottom.
The big blue thing?
That's a cluster of like as many as 3,000 boats.
Holy macaroni.
And all of those like long snake looking things,
Yeah.
that's like a boat towing other boats.
Oh. See, I thought you were going to tell me, like,
Why?
all of those long snake things, those are boats. And then you
No.
were like, no, that big blob, that's 3,000 boats.
The thing that looks like a giant narwhal.
It does look like a narwhal because there's like a trail of boats off of its head, like its horn.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Oh, snapper.
Yeah. So they're going. They're
she just
going.
ignored you.
I'm over it. So they're going at least 450 kilometers north of the North Korean border into Russia and destroying the Russian waters as well.
And, like, what's the word I'm looking for? We can probably assume, I guess, that all the boats in that clump are using these drift nets, too.
Probably not all of them, but a good chunk of them. It seems like the drift nets are mostly being used for river fishing, not sea fishing. But obviously it's still problematic.
Yeah.
But when I saw the use of them, it was quoted for river fishing.
Okay.
Because they're going up these like Russian rivers too. Like they're not even like
Is the current strong? In the Russian River?
why do I
Like,
do this?
somebody laugh. This is an audio-based program.
I did laugh.
They can't just see the scorned looks that I'm getting.
You get mad when people ignore you, and then you get mad when only I laugh. What do you want?
Apparently Susan's not good enough.
I heard you laugh. But nobody laughed for like a second. Just stared at me like
My laugh starts silent, and then it gets very hearty.
it fades in.
The Russian Coast Guard, they regulate how much the Russian fishermen can be fishing. They even down to like you can only fish on certain days and like all this stuff. They're really, really strict about it. But of course, there's only so much they can do to the North Koreans. What is going through your head?
Nothing.
You're just
Don't
giving
worry
me
about
this
it.
look.
I'm
No,
just-
that's set up deep.
Yeah, I'm just enjoying myself.
Okay.
I'm
I'm
gonna be
enjoying making a podcast with you, my best friend.
So your oats.
Sow my oats, feel my beans.
So they do what they can with the North Korean boats. They also have been known to detain them. And they've also been known to occasionally use force.
When the boats roll into the water and the Coast Guard finds them, they say, "Whale, whale, whale."
You've been sitting on
What
that
do we
one.
have here? Nothing. Oh, you guys are the worst. If I make a joke,
That's
nobody laughs.
It's because Brittany is trying to think so hard of a better pun.
I'm going to outpun you.
It's fine. I like the idea that we're on a team together to get as many puns into this episode as we can and to annoy Elizabeth as much as possible.
We're just trying to make this episode fishy.
You're throwing off my groove.
my gills.
Oh my god, that was awful. That was a stretch. Oh. All right, there have also been occasional gunfire and fights resulting in casualties and mortalities on both sides when it came to North Koreans encountering the Russian Coast Guard.
At any point, was anybody like, I can't take any more of this?
I told you they jumped ship. That was a good one.
That was a great
I liked
one.
that one.
I liked it.
Like I said, they detained ships in Russia. The ships that were detained, so one of the documentaries, like they were in Russian waters filming, and they had a ship being detained then, and the film crew showed it, and they showed that there was also women on board.
Oh.
They showed the North Koreans washing themselves with seawater because they're not allowed on land. Like, so they have to stay on the boat, detained in water.
So, at what point did their skin start getting infections and weird growths
Yeah.
on it and open sores? Because that's exactly what overexposure to seawater does.
Yeah.
They didn't really mention anything about that.
You'll get salt tongue.
But then the crew was like talking to the Coast Guard, and they were like, so who's feeding these people? And who is giving them drinking water and provisions and first aid and like all of these things? And the Coast Guard was like, that is up to North Korean's consulate to provide those things. And if they're not providing them, then they just don't get them, and they were not providing them.
Yeah. Unsurprisingly.
Very, very unsurprisingly. So then they detain them for as long as they detain them, and then they just deport them. And then that's it.
It's sad though to think of all of these ships out at sea camp.
Oh man, that was a clever one.
I know. I'm very proud. I went to say pleased and proud, and I got plowed.
This is not that kind of show.
Yeah, and also I'm drinking Walter.
Who's Walter?
I'm drinking water. I'm not plowed in any sense of the word.
Gross. All right, go ahead to your next slide. These two images were taken by Russian satellites. Again, this is the satellites that are tracking poaching. And these images are showing harbors in North Korea, and all of these little shapes are individual fishing boats parked in one harbor.
Holy moly. How are they not just like
How?
bonky? They look like they're on top of each other.
They pretty much are.
How are they not getting destroyed?
Beats me.
Here's the thing. They probably are, which is probably why they're not
I was
faring well
Gonna
in
say
the
that
open
too,
sea.
yeah.
I mean, there's so many reasons that they're not faring well in the open sea.
They're not
Right.
made for the open sea.
That-
number
No.
one.
Right, and then you're not taking care of them properly to maintain them even remotely well enough to be able to handle that either.
Mm-hmm. And then go ahead to the next one. The next slide. So this is showing a little bit better because we talked about the Japan side of North Korea. This is showing a little bit more on the Chinese side of North Korea. All of the fishing boats, all the red dots are the fishing boats.
Are they allowed to be there though?
Not technically, but they could be permitted via like black market dealings.
Okay.
So like legality, no, but like, might they have some sort of permission? It's possible.
Okay.
There's literally like a North Korean representative in China who like handles all of these dealings.
Oh.
Yeah.
Holy mackerel.
Yeah. Good one.
That was an easy one.
Yeah.
I could've-
This is a good one.
I could have
still.
whipped that out at any point.
Why didn't I?
I don't know, man. And then, of course, we just have another photo of like a large number of boats. These ones are a little bit more spread out, but that's just another kind of idea of how many boats there are.
When they're being held, and you were talking about the seawater and stuff, like, do they get like fresh water and food? Do you know?
They get, so according to that one defector, they would get 3 months of rations.
Okay. So they might get like a peanut butter and jellyfish sandwich.
The setup for that?
Or like
Just-
maybe a bologna sandwich.
No.
Are you sure you really inspected this case from all anglers, though?
Hey, Liz.
I'm about to take a long walk off a short pier right now.
Well, it's your fault for falling for them hook, line, and sinker.
Don't play coy with us, okay?
No! I'm going into my shell.
Oh my god.
There's a hole in my shirt.
Listen, Elizabeth, we're your friends, not your enemies.
Hey, Vicky, keep going. Don't clam up, okay?
This case is your oyster.
Yeah,
Yeah, it wasn't good, but I'm
No.
working on it.
All right. Okay, so
You're making her want to put a hammer through her head.
Was that hammerhead shark?
I like that one.
Oh,
I need a drink.
yeah.
Walter.
Get a drink and then return to your yellow perch on the couch.
Get out! This is so unacceptable. Never in my life. Never in my life have I been
yelled
in
at
a less
girl like this?
professional environment. Don't you Tyra Banks me.
I have never yelled at a girl like this in my life.
We were rooting for you. We were all rooting for you.
Listen, I'm sorry that we're making so many puns.
I
But
don't trust you.
we can't help ourselves.
No!
Hannah, stop being such a bass.
I am making a bass out of myself.
Oh my god.
Listen,
I don't wanna.
Hey, we have to finish this case eventually.
you look a little red. Do I need to call a nurse shark? Some of mine aren't good, but I'm trying. Susan's are the best.
I know.
Because I always think Susan is going to be sincere as well.
All right. So, you talked about it a little bit earlier, asking about if these boats were defectors. There's a lot of reasons as to why that's very, very much not suspected to be the case. First of which being the fact that most of these boats have identifying information on them, as in like a registration number for the boat itself, as well as fishing equipment and such. But primarily because this is like one of the worst ways that you could do it. It would be a lot easier to just sail to South Korea instead of trying to go all the way to Japan. Like, it just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. If you already have a boat and you're already on open waters, you'd be better off going to South Korea, quite frankly. Now, that's not to say that maybe some people didn't have that goal and then got washed up elsewhere. But it's pretty risky, especially if North Korea has Navy, Army ships on the waters.
Yeah, that's true.
It would be
So-
a little bit like, instead of, to go with our like Mexico to US
Mhm.
analogy, it would be like, instead of just going to the US, you'd like sailed to Brazil. Like, This
Did you pull
episode.
that one out because we already talked about
This
it?
episode is sponsored by
By
Brazil.
Yeah. So to kind of talk a little bit more about like the disposal of these boats and how they're handled. In 2017, a boat washed up on the coast of Japan with 8 corpses on it. Like I mentioned before, the local municipality was responsible for taking care of the dead. That municipality has a welfare division who was responsible for them. And in that case, they cremated the bodies and they store the ashes of the 8 fishermen like in the town. They have like a temple that they're
Mhm.
stored in. But it like really is an ethical debacle like for those responsible because they feel a little bit inclined to try to provide like the best farewell that they can, and like they don't know like the religion of the victims. Like they're trying to be like really respectful,
Yeah.
and they just there's only so much they can do. So on that boat in particular though, there was no fishing equipment. They didn't even have a radio.
Oh.
So it is possible, like I said, that some of these people were defectors. It's just hard to tell. You know, like they could have tossed stuff overboard. You know,
Stuff could have just been washed overboard.
exactly.
With the tossing and the waves.
Exactly. Now, like I mentioned, also North Korea and Japan have a very tumultuous relationship. A lot of citizens are frankly afraid of the boats because they are scared that North Korea is sending spies, like disguised as fishermen, via these boats.
Disguised as boats.
No,
Transformers.
you're ridiculous.
Well, I didn't know where that was going.
Beginning when Kim Jong-il took over the North Korean spy organization, North Korea began regularly abducting Japanese citizens in the 70s and 80s. And this is part of like the relationship of why a lot of Japanese citizens are afraid.
Yeah.
Basically, because they've done things like this in the past. Also because some of the boats arrived on land like in real good shape, but with no passengers on board. So yeah, very suspicious. On one of those such wrecks, they even found a hat of a military commander. And also the number of boats that hit land. Again, it kind of coincides with a lot of things, but it also coincided with when North Korea stopped testing missiles in 2017. So they kind of were like, well, maybe they're not testing missiles anymore and they're doing like recon. Kind of.
They've switched to Transformers.
I see.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
CBMs have taken a back seat to
Exactly.
Optimus Prime.
How long would it take other countries to just like see how sus some of this looked and be like, we ain't taking Nautilus crap anymore?
Nautilus crap.
Listen, I have to like really applaud Liz because even with all the puns, like you're not floundering, even though I know we're krilling you.
Krilling. I'm just mad because no thoughts had empty. Like I'm so focused.
You can't puns back.
I can't. Like I'm just so focused on the facts that like I can't be creative up here right now. It's not fair. I know.
I have nothing to say.
I know. Anyway.
No thoughts head only full of puns.
Fishy puns.
I pushed everything else out to make room for the puns.
Yeah. Okay.
Alright, can we dive in again?
Ready to submerge.
Oh, that was good.
It was.
Honestly, I'm just glad that Brittany and Susan took the opportunity to be with us today.
Listen, though, I really just can't fathom the depth of this situation.
Oh, alrighty. So we're gonna talk a little bit more about basically the local fishermen, because this is like such a crappy thing. Because on one hand, a lot of these people, like I said, they're choosing to go back, like, which is crazy to me. But I mean, that's like what happens when you're kind of brainwashed into the society.
Plus, your family's still there.
True.
Yeah.
True. Absolutely.
Leave
So,
everything you know.
I live in Japan now.
Yeah.
Sorry, wife and 14 kids.
I know.
Actually, I don't think you're allowed to have 14 kids.
No, you're not. Lots of forced abortion in North Korea. Also,
Sorry
lower.
for the forced abortion discussion in this fish puns episode.
Also, there's just like a lower birth rate because women aren't healthy.
Yeah.
Like,
sad.
they're not near as fertile as women in like a country that's doing better.
I
Yeah.
assume that like the mortality rate is high when it comes to having a child anyway.
I don't know if the infant mortality rate is.
I mean for mothers, just I feel like
possibly.
their care just isn't as good as it should be.
Oh, it's definitely not. I would be surprised if their children were born in hospitals in most cases. Like, obviously, the capital is like they have hospitals and stuff, but you know the rural areas probably not. Anyways,
I got scared by
it's just the litter box.
I got scared by the self-cleaning litter box.
Yeah. So we talked about the Chinese fishing fleet that is operating in private, going out into the North Korean waters to fish illegally. They're doing this with the illegal licenses that they're getting from North Korea. The foreign fishing in North Korean waters is like completely prohibited also by the United Nations. And this was also done in 2017 in response to North Koreans' nuclear weapons tests. So North Korea should not be issuing licenses to an outside country because of that rule.
Yeah.
So that's like where that comes from. Because I mean, generally you can give other countries permission, but the UN is prohibiting that.
So they're not allowed to make any eels.
Nope, no eels. Mm-mm.
Britt, you can't do any beta than that.
I'm feeling a little sunk right now.
All right, we don't have a whole lot more to talk about, so let's wrap up. Overall, the Japanese squid harvest has dropped 80% in the last decade due to this like snowball effect of things that's happening. We know the Chinese are fishing more than they should. We know the North Koreans are fishing more than they should. We know that they are fishing things that they should not be fishing, be it because of the places that they are, or the tools that they are using, or like the age and size of the animals that they are keeping. Like there's a bunch of
and quantity and time of year and all of that.
Absolutely. They're effectively cutting off the supply, particularly to squid, but obviously also to other wildlife in the East Sea. And this cut off is making North Korean fishermen have to travel farther to catch their quota. So what's ending up happening is that these fishermen are so desperate that they are going into more treacherous, more dangerous waters farther than their boats can really handle, and they're not coming back from it. It's happening so much and at such a quick rate that there are coastal villages in North Korea at this point that they refer to as widow villages.
Oh my.
Yeah. Yep. Also, just as far as the ethics of this whole situation goes, now we talked about the like fishing unit town, but in the towns that aren't regulated by a fishing unit and it's just the licenses that are being offered to individual fishermen, what's happening with these fishermen is I'm sorry, this is let me rewind. When the Chinese are getting the black market licenses to fish, what's happening with them is that they have to pay for the license. Then they have to pay North Korea a commission on the catch. And then they have to, like I mentioned before, they have to employ North Korean fishermen on the boat. But they don't get to pay the North Koreans directly because North Korea takes care of it. So they pay the state their workers' salary. North Korea is selling thousands of these permits a year to Chinese fishermen. And because they're putting the Chinese fishermen in the North Korean waters, this is also pushing the North Korean fishermen farther and farther and farther away.
Yeah.
Right? Now, because the depletion of resources, fewer Chinese fishermen are purchasing licenses. It's starting to not be worth the trouble. But like that's a whole other problem in and of itself, because that means they have wrecked the ecosystem that much that it's not even worth their money at this point.
Yeah, they're like not going to make back their investment.
No, exactly. So that's just a whole thing. And of course, like I mentioned, China and North Korea do have a diplomatic relationship. So they have to keep friendly as things are right now. China is known for deporting defectors back to North Korea. In 1987, Russia and North Korea made an agreement to allot an annual quota of fish to North Korea, but it was suspended in 2018. The poaching system in place now is just so vast that it is completely uncontrollable. There's so many boats. There's so many different factors involved that there's really not a whole lot that can be done about it. I also want to mention that if you're gonna try to research any of this about any of it on your own, I would not pay attention to sources from the US, because the US just makes China look like the bad guys. And it's like China's not innocent, but there are so many other guilty parties, and it's obvious that the Chinese or the American media is hyper fixating on making China the bad guys only.
And
Which
not, looking into the other variables.
Yeah, like when I did my research, I was like, well, that's interesting, because every UK resource, all of the Middle Eastern resources, like all of the Japanese resources were all like very unbiased and reported on every picture that they could. And then when I looked at the US stuff, it was like China's poaching. And I was like, there's so much more to it.
So you could say they had their trouts about China.
They really do, honestly.
Man,
but like
fish need to take them to school.
But like the US media isn't acknowledging that North Korea is allowing it to happen. North Korea is promoting it
and facilitating it.
Exactly. So that's like the whole picture. It's a devastating like situation that I don't know if it'll ever be recoverable.
Yeah.
I do have a video. The link is on the next slide. You might have to copy and paste it. We'll see how. This is a short video just to show some of the boats kind of up. So these are the boats, some of them.
Oh.
It's just a little slideshow of images.
They are pretty rickety.
They're very rickety. You can see a remnant of a flag. Some of the nets, I think that is. Yeah. So this is the awful nets.
Wow, they almost just look like cotton.
Right? It's like such a thin
like
fiber.
polyfill.
And you can see how badly it gets knotted, and that's why they are like a one-time use. It's like once they're knotted up, they just dump them in the ocean.
They're so eerie, obviously.
They are, like, how do people live on these boats for months?
I think the fact that nobody is on them and it just washed up on shore is what's eerie to me.
Yeah. And I mean, the shameful thing about it is you say, how can anybody live? Honestly, this is probably not too different from their home.
Yeah. It's just on water instead.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
It's just scarier on water because you're completely isolated.
Yeah.
Like you're really prone to the elements once you're on the open sea.
And some of the boats, I'm not kidding, there were so many pictures. Some of the boats were literally no bigger than rowboats.
That's
I mean,
crazy.
like some of them were decently large. Like some of these ones are obviously pretty big, but literally some of them were like an 8-person rowboat.
That's crazy. I have my whole life I've had such a morbid fascination with like mystery and accidents and death at sea. So like
Mhm.
it's creepy, but also very interesting.
Yeah.
I think it's always creepy. The reason that people are drawn to like abandoned things is it's always creepy to see material culture left behind when no one is there.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
those boots or like, you know what I mean?
And it's like, what's the story? Why was this abandoned? Like,
Yeah,
why
why was
is
this
this
left
now
here?
the way it is?
I always thought it's really interesting too how it seems like once a thing is abandoned, it deteriorates faster.
Okay, here's the other weird thing about abandoned things and places and buildings and objects is that when it is not abandoned, when it's in use, when it is occupied, you think of it as a material thing.
Mhm.
When it is abandoned, it almost takes on a life.
Yeah.
Like then it becomes like you can almost view it more as like a living object because you want to know its story then.
Yeah. I'm obviously like I picked this story for a reason. I feel very strongly about the situation of North Korea. Like I said, there's a lot of people who would have had the opportunity to stay in Japan if they had wanted to and chose not to. Whether that be because of family back in North Korea or whether that be because of their own personal loyalties to the state. But that said, there are a lot of people who are trying to get out. You know, people are dying of starvation, dehydration, malnourishment, all kinds of horrible disease, preventable diseases because of the situation there and how kind of the lack of support that the people are genuinely getting from the state. You know, they support the big cities and the tourist spots, and even though they're still highly regulated, you know, if you've seen those videos of the tourist spots, that is not representative of the entire country. That is a front.
And it's just really sad that like the rest of the world, like just by and large, isn't better educated about this. Like even the stuff we do are able to learn. It's just like the tip of the iceberg. Like we don't really know the depth of it, and that's just in and of itself is very sad. Like how poorly educated we are, and how poorly educated about it we will remain.
Yep. I encourage you to do some more research about it if you can and if that wouldn't upset you too much. There's a really, really wonderful and strong woman who is a North Korean defector. Her name is Yeonmi Park. And she is on YouTube and she talks about all kinds of aspects of what it was like to live in Korea, the culture shock of then leaving, what her struggle to leave was, because it's not like you just get your passport and hop on a plane and go. Like we're talking running from police, trying to dodge gunfire, you know, trying to cross bodies of water, like really, really like things that you would only see in the movies.
Yeah, there's a reason that they're called defectors and not immigrants or refugees.
Exactly. But again, I would encourage you to check out Yeonmi Park. That's Yeonmi Park. She's really wonderful and she just has a ton of resources. Another resource that I want to shout out because a lot of people then ask, well, what am I going to do about it? Like, what could I possibly do to help these people? There is an organization called the Now Action and Unity for Human Rights. That's NAUH organization. And we're going to link that in this episode as well. And they have resources as to how you can help, including just donating funds to help get people out of there. They are an organization for human rights and they are fighting for a positive change. So I'm going to link both of those things in our sources and I really encourage you to check those out. obviously this whole thing's a mess.
Yeah. Like you said, it goes far beyond just people fishing in the wrong spots.
Yeah.
There's a systemic problem at the base of the issue.
Yep. So, and I mean, even doing as much as just watching a couple of Yeonmi Park's videos, that helps. That puts her, that gets her more reach. That means more people see it, and that's half of the struggle as well. So, those are the ghost boats.
Boo boats.
The boo boats.
Would you like to? Wow. Do you two have anything to add or any?
Yeah.
It's just incredibly depressing.
I know.
Fish puns aside, that's incredibly depressing.
It was.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It was really. At first I told Hannah, I was like, I don't know if this is going to be like enough for an episode, and then I was like, never mind.
Yeah. Would you like to talk about reading and recommending?
I'm not.
Actually, we don't do reading and recommending for
Yeah,
Murder Mystery.
we're not doing that.
Fish pun.
What's your favorite export?
What's your favorite embargoed nation?
Oh.
Who's your favorite dictator?
Which United Nation is your favorite nation?
Yeah, like it's like the ones that are like close by.
Let me think.
Yeah, we do. What's your favorite ocean creature?
Yeah, we could do that.
Who wants to go first?
Susan.
No, what's your favorite sea creature, Elizabeth?
Mine?
Yeah, actually.
Actually, sea turtles probably.
Okay.
Do you
Yeah.
have a reason why, or you just enjoy them?
I just like them. I think they're neat. I've always liked turtles.
Yeah.
So.
I painted a turtle for your dad. A sea turtle.
Yeah, Dad loves sea turtles. He got to feed one once. He fed it a banana.
Yeah.
Didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Pan?
My favorite sea creature is a cuttlefish.
Oh, nice.
They're so cute.
They're very cute and they're very, very cool.
Yeah.
They're evolutionarily like really super cool. I've eaten cuttlefish also. One Thanksgiving, I was working for
She loves them, but she eats them.
I didn't like seek it out. I was working for the weather, and my coworker.
TM.
My coworker was from Hawaii. She was Asian and from Hawaii, and she had a bag of dried cuttlefish, and she was like, "Hannah, do you want to share some cuttlefish with me?" And I was like, "I've never had it. I'll try it." And it was like very fishy rubber bands.
Ew.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like wet or anything. It was just very chewy.
I didn't assume it was wet. It was dried fish.
I know, but like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Stingrays.
Stingrays.
Oh yes.
I love stingrays.
Oh. Made me think of the Mr. Ray.
Uh-huh.
From Finding Nemo.
I thought you did SpongeBob.
I thought you were too for
No.
a second.
Do you have a reason?
Do-do-do-do-do-do.
Do you have a reason why you like stingrays so much?
Stingrays are just like cute little puppies of the ocean.
I love their little mouths.
Yeah. the
Yeah.
little sucker mouths and
And we've all
Mhm.
petted stingrays.
And fed
and
stingrays.
them.
You
love
love
them.
them.
If you ever get the opportunity to feed a stingray, do it. Just trust
They're
me.
the cutest things.
They are.
But also be careful of them.
Yeah.
Be careful of any wild animal.
Like-
either.
Yeah, like in a controlled
Yeah,
environment.
not just like at the ocean.
Like, don't just seek one out in the ocean.
Yeah. What about you, Suze?
I like leafy sea dragons.
Oh yes, I love a camouflage boy.
Yes.
That's why I like
Handsome
camouflage.
boys.
Yeah.
Elizabeth.
Yes.
Where can the people find us?
We are Briefcase Crimes on all social media. We are on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. We are Briefcase Crimes anywhere where you can listen to your podcasts. If you would like to support us monetarily, you can do so by buying us a coffee at ko-fi.com/briefcasecrime. You can also purchase any of the books that we recommend or might mention in our episodes from our bookshop.org link. Bookshop.org supports local bookstores by donating 75% of profits to them, and they support us through our affiliate link as well by donating a small percentage of profits to us. That link, as well as any of the other resources and links that our brief, that link as well as our brief can be found in our bio and in the description of this podcast in our link tree.
Very well said, Elizabeth.
And I think we want to shout out one other thing today.
We do. So, as you know, we're at our friend's house, Brittany and Susan.
Mm-hmm.
Brittany and Susan have two very adorable cats. One of them joined us today, Ulu, and the other, Mr. Yoli, was not able to attend this recording because he is currently in the Little Kitty Hospital.
Yep.
He is having
the hospital, if you will.
The hospital. He is having some issues with his bladder. He has a bladder infection and a bladder obstruction. He was taken in this morning on a Sunday
to the emergency vet.
So obviously he couldn't go to his normal vet. In addition to the fact that now he's got this emergency vet Sunday visit sort of bill that comes with that.
Mm-hmm.
Brittany, our dear, dear friend, just had surgery at the beginning of the month. So, you know, obviously times are a little tough with medical bills for your human, let alone an unexpected medical bill for your sweet, sweet Yoli boy. So we're going to include a GoFundMe link in the description of this episode in the do you want to put it in the link tree?
Yeah, we can also put it in the link tree.
If you feel like you want to learn more about Yoli and his story, you want to see pictures of him.
He is so cute. Go look at the pictures.
He is a precious gift. And if you feel inclined to donate, please, please do. Every little bit helps.
$1 is more than enough, more than generous.
Yes.
If you can.
And as always, if you want to donate through Coffee and just leave us a message that it is for Yoli, we will make sure that that money gets to the GoFundMe. If that's a better method for you. But I believe GoFundMe will let you donate like even up to like as little as $1.
I think it's, it'll let you put in a custom amount and it'll let you put in a message. So you can just say cat fund Yoli, whatever you want to put in there. And animal, whatever, and we'll know that that is for poor little Yoli's vet bills.
Yes, they are astronomical. It's not just expensive to be a sick human in this country. It's also expensive to be a poor little puss cat.
Yep.
Having an issue with his little bladder. So any little bit helps, and we are very thankful to have a listenership that cares about that kind of thing.
Yes.
And on that note, would you like to wrap this up, Elizabeth?
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for listening.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
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 Bye.